The wind carried the scent of pine and the distant hum of water as Thomas Avery stood at the edge of his property, hands resting on the weathered railing of his old wooden porch. Beyond the trees lay the small dam he had built with his own hands 40 years ago, a curved stone and timber wall that cradled the lake behind it like a father holding his child. That dam wasn't just a structure of rock and mortar. It was a legacy, a labor of love built after the flood that took his wife and son in '83. Every stone he laid had been a promise. No one in this valley would ever suffer what he had suffered. He didn't build it for power or money. He built it for peace, a quiet monument to a vow kept in the silence of grief. The morning light spilled across the valley, glinting off the still waters of Avery Lake. The ducks skimmed across its glassy surface, and the sound of the stream below whispered like a lullaby. But Thomas's peace was thin these days. Across the fence line, men in suits had begun visiting more often, clipboards, shiny shoes, and smirks that carried the faint arrogance of people who believed paperwork outranked decency. The Homeowners Association, or as they called themselves, the Silver Creek Management Board, had decided that his dam, his life's work, was a violation of environmental regulation and unpaid maintenance fees. They claimed it blocked a shared waterway, that it was dangerous, old, unnecessary. But Thomas knew better. The dam was solid. He checked it every month, patched cracks, cleared debris. It was stronger than any board meeting or legal notice. That morning, a convoy of black trucks rolled up the gravel road. Thomas watched as a man in a tailored gray suit stepped out, flanked by 2 younger assistants. The man's smile was polished, his handshake practiced. "Mr. Avery," he began, voice smooth as oil, "I'm Richard Crowley, president of the Silver Creek HOA. We've sent you multiple notices about the dam. It's unsafe. The board voted unanimously to have it removed." Thomas didn't flinch. "You voted to destroy something you don't understand," he said quietly. "That dam holds this whole valley together. You tear it down, and the first real rain will take half your precious neighborhood with it." Crowley chuckled, adjusting his sunglasses. "Come now, Mr. Avery. We've had engineers assess the site. You can't just dam public water. The bylaws are clear. You'll need to pay the removal fee or vacate the property." The board's made its decision. Thomas's jaw tightened. His voice was steady, but there was a storm in his eyes. "The board doesn't understand nature. It doesn't understand history. You think money and meetings can outvote the river. You think paper can stop what's coming." Crowley smirked, already turning back to his truck. "Let's not be dramatic. It's just a dam." But to Thomas, it wasn't just anything. That dam had saved this valley more than once. He remembered the heavy rains of 2007, when the creek swelled and the storm drains overflowed. The dam had held strong, holding back the surge that would have drowned Silver Creek's new homes. But no one remembered that now. People moved in, lawns manicured, driveways expanded, and they forgot why the ground beneath them was dry and safe. They forgot who had kept it that way. Over the next week, Thomas wrote letters, called the county, even invited local journalists to see the dam. But no one came. To the world, he was just an old man standing in the way of progress. The HOA filed paperwork faster than he could fight it, and one gray morning in early spring, he awoke to the roar of engines and the clang of metal against stone. They were doing it, excavators, bulldozers, men in orange vests. The sound was deafening. Thomas stumbled toward the site, shouting, waving his arms. "Stop, you fools, stop." But his words were drowned in the thunder of machinery. Crowley stood nearby, coffee in hand, supervising like a man overseeing the pruning of a hedge. "You had your chance, Mr. Avery," he called over the noise. "This is happening with or without you." Thomas's heart ached as he watched them rip into the dam. The first crack sounded like a scream. Stones tumbled, wood splintered, and the water behind it began to tremble, rising against the weakened wall. The workers laughed, unaware of what they were doing. By evening, the dam was gone, reduced to rubble and mud. The lake drained slowly, leaving behind a barren pit of rock and silt. Thomas stood there long after everyone had left, staring at the broken remains of his life's work. For days, he wandered his land like a ghost. The silence was unbearable. The sound of running water that had always calmed him was gone. The birds no longer nested by the shore. Without the dam, the water cut a new path through the valley, carving into the soft earth, undermining the roots of trees and the edges of roads. Thomas knew what was coming. He could see it, the subtle shift in the soil, the way the ground near the subdivision began to sag. He tried to warn them again, sending letters to the board, begging them to reinforce the runoff channels, to prepare for heavy rain. They ignored him. Some mocked him in online posts. "Crazy old man thinks he's Noah," one resident wrote. "He should build an ark next." Then came the rain. It started one Thursday evening in late April, a steady drizzle that soon turned to a downpour. By nightfall, the valley was swallowed in mist. The creeks rose, swollen and angry. Without the dam's steadying hand, the water tore through the lower banks, devouring everything in its path. Thomas stood on his porch, rain lashing his face, watching the chaos unfold. He wanted to feel vindicated, but all he felt was sorrow. He knew pain was coming, not for him, but for those who had laughed. By midnight, the first road collapsed. A culvert gave way, sending torrents of water surging into the Silver Creek estates. Lawns turned into rivers, cars floated, fences disappeared beneath churning mud. The same HOA members who had laughed at him now ran through the streets, shouting, trying to save what they could. The power lines went down, and the night filled with the sound of breaking glass and distant cries. Thomas grabbed his lantern and his old truck keys. He drove toward the subdivision, the wipers barely keeping up with the sheets of rain. He didn't come to gloat. He came to help. That's who he was, always had been. He pulled up near the first flooded house and waded into the water. A mother screamed from an upstairs window, holding a child. The doors jammed. She cried. Thomas didn't hesitate. He forced it open with his shoulder, water rushing past his legs. He guided them out, one by one, toward his truck. He made trip after trip, hauling people to higher ground, the same people who'd signed the petitions against him. By dawn, the entire neighborhood was underwater. The storm finally eased, but the destruction was unimaginable. Dozens of homes were lost. Roads washed out, vehicles half buried in mud. The once pristine lawns of Silver Creek were gone, replaced by a gray wasteland of debris. Thomas's house, sitting higher up the hill, stood untouched. From there, he watched the morning light break over what had once been a proud neighborhood. And in that silence, he felt both heartbreak and strange peace. Nature had spoken, not out of vengeance, but out of truth. You cannot defy what you don't respect. In the days that followed, the news spread fast. Reporters came, filming the devastation. The county blamed faulty infrastructure. Crowley avoided cameras, hiding behind legal statements. But when one journalist discovered old photos of the dam, of how it once protected the valley, everything changed. The story broke nationwide. Local HOA destroys dam, neighborhood floods days later. People called it karma. Thomas didn't like that word. To him, it wasn't karma. It was consequence. Weeks later, as cleanup crews worked through the mud, Crowley showed up at Thomas's gate. His suit was gone, his shoes were caked with dirt. He looked smaller, his arrogance drowned in humility. "Mr. Avery," he said quietly, I didn't understand. None of us did. You tried to warn us. I'm sorry." Thomas studied him for a long time. Then he nodded toward the valley. "You learned the hard way what the water already knew," he said. "You can't own the land. You can only take care of it for a while." Crowley lowered his head. "The board wants to rebuild. We'd like your help, to make sure it's done right this time." For a moment, Thomas didn't answer. Then, slowly, he extended his weathered hand. "Then let's build something worth keeping." Over the following months, Thomas worked side by side with volunteers, engineers, and residents. Together they rebuilt not just the dam, but the spirit of the valley. This time, the structure was stronger, designed with modern reinforcements and the same wisdom that had guided Thomas all his life. He taught them how to read the land, how to listen to the soil, how to follow the flow of water, how to respect the rhythm of nature rather than fight it. Crowley worked beside him, shoveling, sweating, learning humility one stone at a time. When the new dam was complete, the townspeople gathered for a small ceremony. No speeches, no officials, just neighbors standing together, watching the water rise once more behind the sturdy wall. The sun dipped low, casting a golden light over the valley, reflecting off the calm surface of the lake. Thomas stood quietly at the edge, his old hat in his hands. He felt something he hadn't felt in decades, contentment. Later that evening, as he walked home, he passed by a little girl playing near the rebuilt stream. She smiled and handed him a wildflower. "Mom says you saved us," she said softly. Thomas knelt, taking the flower gently. "No," he said with a faint smile. "The land saved itself. I just listened." Years went by, and the story of the dam became local legend, told in schools, written in newspapers, whispered by campfires. People came to visit the Avery Dam, not as a tourist spot, but as a reminder of balance between man and nature, pride and humility, greed and gratitude. Thomas lived long enough to see the valley flourish again. New trees grew where old ones had fallen. Birds returned to the lake. The sound of running water filled the air once more. When Thomas passed away peacefully one summer morning, the town gathered by the dam to honor him. They laid flowers on the edge of the water, and as the breeze carried the scent of pine and memory, Crowley, now older, gentler, spoke softly. He warned us, and we didn't listen. But when the flood came, he still came for us. That's the kind of man he was. The sun rose high, casting ripples of light across the surface. The dam stood strong, unyielding, not as a monument to one man's defiance, but to his compassion. It held back not just water, but the weight of ignorance, arrogance, and forgetfulness. It reminded everyone that sometimes, the strongest walls are built not of stone, but of understanding. In the end, Thomas Avery's story wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about grace, the quiet, enduring kind that flows like water, shaping everything it touches. And in that valley, where laughter once mocked, and floods once roared, peace returned, steady, humble, and eternal.